Experts by experience. Real conversations, real people, real stories. Hello, people, and welcome back to another episode of the Experts by Experience podcast. And today we will be taking a deep dive into the subject of restorative justice practice. And to help us do this, we are joined by the lovely Julie from Calm Mediation. Hi, Julie.
Hi.
How are you feeling?
I'm good today, thank you.
Lovely stuff. So yeah, Nic, take it away.
Absolutely. So, Julie, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and why you've chosen to do the work that you do?
Okay, thanks for having me, first of all. So why do I do the work that I do? Okay, so I left school with few exams, went to secretarial college because my options were a little bit limited. And then I started a career in the civil service, which I quickly realised was not for me. So I was a little bit directionless. So I started to do a little bit of volunteering. I was looking around, looking at people in my community. Me and others were dealing with lots of issues. There was lots going on. So I started doing a bit of volunteering in a very small London borough. I started off doing a bit of drug awareness program for young people, going into schools, talking to young people about drugs. Moved on then to mentoring young people leaving local authority care. And kind of from there in a small borough, I moved around a little bit. Did a bit of work alongside social services and working in youth offending service. And then eventually I found myself in working in domestic abuse, where I stayed for a number of years, actually. And I was managing a DV project in South London when I came across restorative justice for the second time, actually. I'd kind of come across it back in my days in the youth offending service for young offenders, but didn't really know too much about it. And I think back then it was mostly for kind of burglary and those offences, and mostly for young offenders. So I had a little bit of knowledge, but not too much. But I saw that RJ was being offered to victims of domestic abuse. And quite frankly, working in domestic abuse at that point, I was quite horrified, I have to say. And I felt quite strongly about it. And I was kind of looking for my arguments against why that shouldn't happen, which led me into looking into restorative justice a little bit more, getting to understand it a little bit more, which eventually led on to me actually training to become a facilitator. By which point, I could obviously see the real benefits of restorative justice. And then Calm Mediation won the MOPAC contract in 2019 to deliver restorative justice London-wide as the Commission Service for London. And they were looking for a service manager. So I applied and I was successful. And now I think here we are nearly 7 years later. Wow. I'm the head of service for RJ at Calm.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Sounds like a lot of your experiences and like your environment really informed those decisions and like how you kind of got there. That's awesome. So I guess we see with like Calm Mediation's tagline, it says a voice for change, a choice for change, and a chance for change. So like, how do you see how, the values that you have in this area, how are these values embedded into the work that you do?
So we shorten it to a voice, a choice, and a chance for change.
Nice.
And that does belong to Calm. That's Calm's ethos. But really, it does sum up my career as well. So simply put, it's about empowering people. So that's about empowering people with information, empowering people with resources, sometimes confidence, sometimes a little bit of gentle guidance. But it's about empowering people to kind of recognise what their needs are and be in a position to be able to have those needs met.
Yeah.
But above and beyond that, it's an ethos that promotes empathy. It promotes understanding. It's a kind of let's talk to each other more. Let's resolve conflicts, or at least understand what led us here. How we might prevent us from causing further harm to each other.
Yeah.
Also to find a way forward. So it encompasses all of that. But it really is. It's about communities. It's about individuals. We've got a really strong base in Southwark. So it really is about let's make sure that all of our neighbours, that they have a voice, they have a choice, And if there is something that needs changing, that they have an opportunity to do that.
It's such a good tagline. It really is. What are some of your biggest challenges that you faced?
So probably the biggest challenge is that restorative justice is not widely known about, which is a real shame. So it's about raising awareness, but also it's about dispelling some of the myths about restorative justice. For instance, sometimes restorative justice is seen as a soft option, when in fact it's anything but. So it's actually really challenging for someone who's caused harm to someone else to face that person, whether they're facing them directly in a face-to-face meeting or whether they're entering into some other kind of dialogue, perhaps a letter. It's really, really difficult to kind of come across someone and taking accountability and to really listen, often for the first time, to how their actions have impacted others. Because we quite often talk about kind of, rehabilitation in prison. What does that look like? We used to have the prison fellowship. We used to deliver the sycamore tree. That's not there anymore. What does victim empathy work look like in prison? Because victim empathy work is the one time when an offender's been asked, really, what led up to what happened?
Yeah.
Like,
How did you get there?
How do you get there? Who do you think has been impacted? How do you feel about it? How do you think they feel about it? So the biggest challenge is London is a very big area for us time. We've got a very, very big police force.
Yeah.
So it's around making sure that the system's in place for one, to get the referrals in from the professional agencies, but also for the public to know what restorative justice is, that it's not a soft option. It doesn't kind of impact sentencing. It's not there just to make sure that offenders get lighter sentences.
Yeah.
All of the traditional criminal justice processes will take place alongside restorative justice, but really RJ is about what needs do these parties have when the criminal justice process is over. Because we don't get to the end of the criminal justice system and think, okay, well, that's done now. We can box that tidily away and move on with our lives, because quite often we're still stuck in that trauma. So it's, what do those needs look like? How do we recognise them? How do we meet them? And how do we give people the resources and the services that they need to be able to meet those needs?
Yeah. For sure. That sounds like a big task, I would say. And I think you mentioned earlier how in its earlier years, restorative justice was kind of predominantly used within DV and youth offending spaces. And we do recognize, it's kind of this environment where people can practice empathy and you're giving people a voice for change. So in your professional experience being within RJ all this time, can you kind of give us any examples of how, calm mediation or just RJ in general have helped transform a situation where there was a lot of conflict?
Yeah, so I can think of probably two examples. One where people were known to each other and one where they weren't.
Right.
So there's an example of a case where two strangers came into contact in a public place, had an altercation where one of them was left frightened and angry about the situation that transpired, and the other, who was the offender, they'd acted completely out of character for themselves, right? So there was something that led up to that. There was things going on for both people in both lives. And that person was feeling kind of like a deep guilt and remorse around the way that they'd behaved, the way that they'd portrayed themselves, and the way that they'd caused harm to somebody else. So on the one hand, we've got somebody who's really ashamed of what they've done and is desperate to kind of try and explain themselves. And then we've got somebody who's been left really kind of traumatized and angry about what happened to them and the way that they were treated on the day. So obviously there were lots of preparation meetings before we brought them both together. But actually when we did bring them both together, those two people were able to face each other face to face in a room. They were each able to understand each other. Both of them felt like they had reduced anxiety and increased feelings of safety, because it's also a misconception to think that it's only ever the victim that feels frightened. But often there's lots of things that an offender is frightened of too, including further conflict, right? So to be able to bring two people together and for them both to understand that if and when they are to meet again, and it's particularly important when people are going back into the same communities, that when they're going to meet again, they both have an understanding of what's going to happen and there's no further conflict. Because quite often further conflict is caused by just a your pure anxiety and
Fear, yeah.
what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know,
Victimization, yeah.
Unchecked emotion where we're kind of acting on impulse rather than, okay, I know what's going to happen here. And I know that if I walk out here, then that person's actually going to cross the roads and I'm not going to have to, or we're just going to kind of silently acknowledge each other. It's so empowering to know what's going to happen when you're going to meet somebody again who you've had conflicts with.
Yeah.
So that was one really positive experience there for restorative justice. And then if we think about situations where two people are not known to each other, so this is quite a complex case. And we had two people who had had an incident between them where one of them had caused trauma to the other when they were younger. So they were kind of, I think they were in college. So it's around about those kind of like late adolescent, kind of early adulthood. And there was a traumatic experience that happened between both of them. And the victim had taken a long time to get over it. But then several times over the years, and we're talking about kind of this happened over 2 decades, the offender was trying to make contact with the victim and it was making her really frightened because the contact was kind of coming out of nowhere with no explanation as to what it was for. And eventually it was reported to the police and the police referred it over for restorative justice. So we were able to get the two people. They didn't meet face to face. Neither of them actually wanted to at that point. But they exchanged letters. And it turns out that the offender had felt so bad over what had happened and the ending of their friendship over this way that he'd caused her trauma, that he was literally just trying to reach out years and years later to say that he was sorry.
Okay.
But in turn, the victim felt like she was being stalked and she didn't. Right. There'd been such no contact with them for such a long time. She didn't really understand what that was all about. So we were able to bring them together. He was able to give an apology, which is what he was been trying to do over the years. She was able to accept the apology, but also on the basis that he didn't contact her again. There's usually 2 reasons why a victim would want to participate in restorative justice, and it's either because they've got something that they want to tell the offender, either, you have no idea, that this is the way I've been impacted, the way that my family's been impacted, or there's something that they want to ask them, because there's only really one person who can answer questions about the offence, and that's the offender, because they were.
Yeah. Does the mediation comes before restorative justice, or is restorative justice an umbrella term?
Yeah, but mediation and restorative justice are 2 different things.
Wow. Yeah.
So restorative justice, we come from a starting point where we have one person who's caused the harm and one person who's been harmed, or maybe a couple of people. There might be more people involved. But there's a harmer and there's a harmed person, whereas mediation is more likely to be a pattern or a series of events where there's lots of conflict and kind of lots of blame being thrown around, shall we say.
Thanks for clarifying that, Julia. It's helpful. Always learning. Always learning. What role do you see these practices having in bettering our systems?
It's a complex question. It's about how we are accountable for the harm that we cause to others and about how we respond to those that have caused us harm. It's the same principle, and it's around humanizing our experiences. So we have an incident that happens over here, and kind of we're here in the corner and we're thinking about what happened, and that person is kind of like, they're the person who's caused us harm, so they're like a big kind of scary person in our mind.
Yeah.
And actually they're just a person too. They had a series of events that led you both up to where you were. Okay, you may not ever understand, you may not ever forgive, for sure, because restorative justice is not primarily about forgiveness, although sometimes it does happen. But it's about bringing 2 people together and recognizing them as fellow human beings, and let's try to make a little bit of sense of how we got here, but also how we move forward as well. And what does that look like for each of us? What are our needs? So restorative justice is always around recognizing and responding to needs, recognizing and responding to risk alongside that, to make sure that we can do it safely. So you may or may not know that restorative justice, when we actually bring 2 people together for a conference, it's actually scripted. So everybody gets asked the same set of questions. So everybody has the same opportunity to speak, to have their voice heard, to explain what happened, who was affected and how, and what needs to happen next. And everybody who's involved in any particular incident will get the opportunity to be asked and answer those questions.
Julie, you spoke about your partnership work when we had our chat before with protection approaches, and you spoke specifically about how they work and they're responding that they do to prevent and work with identity-based violence and also hate crime, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us what this collaboration looks like and how it's working and some of the stuff that you guys are doing together?
Yeah. So, really, first of all, let's start by talking about our volunteers. So at the heart of everything that we do are our volunteers. So they're highly trained RJ facilitators. They're from a diverse range of backgrounds with, a wealth of kind of lived experience between them. And we're constantly striving to ensure that our practitioners reflect the demographics of London, which is such a vibrant city, right? So it's a tall order. And that's just not around kind of people's backgrounds, and it's also around their lived experience and the type of crime that they're experiencing as well. So we're always trying to partner up with specialist organisations who can kind of lend us their specialism and kind of just really kind of build on and improve what we do, upskill our volunteers. So Protection Approaches have been amazing. That we've jointly delivered 5 workshops to their network of I think we've reached almost 100 people so far. So their network of both services and service users who are affected or respond to identity-based violence. And the idea of the workshops was like a dual purpose for us to learn from them. So you are the people with that kind of lived experience. What does that look like to you? And what do you need from a service like ours in order for us to best meet your needs? But really, they raise awareness around restorative justice because, hate crime is underreported as it is, but yet there are still a huge amount of reports. Yeah. Very few of those are coming through for restorative justice.
Also, Julie, we know that you're involved with Punch, which is a brand new play by James Graham about Jacob Dunn's real life story through restorative justice. We also know that on the 18th of November, Car Mediation are taking part in a post-show Q&A where you're exploring the promise and the limits of restorative justice. So we're really excited for this play, this Q&A, and the general public to learn about responsibility and accountability for harm and the processes of restorative practices. And what hopes do you have for Punch, and what do you think it's going to bring to audiences?
First thing I will say is for anybody who's ever seen any kind of portrayal of restorative justice on telly and think about restorative justice, please, please, please go and see Punch. It's absolutely the real deal. It is different. It portrays restorative justice in a way that those who have taken part in restorative justice and those who facilitate restorative justice and those who deliver the services, we all recognise it as being the way that it is. Of course, we hope that it raises awareness of restorative justice. Ours is not the only after show panel that there is. The Forgiveness Project is doing a whole host of things right the way across. So if you're not able to get there on Thursday the 18th, do go any other time. It's running from September right through to November. We're there in our International RJ Week. Amazing. Our hope is that it will raise awareness of restorative justice among Londoners. And my hope is that we move forward to a place where individuals who've experienced crime and individuals who have caused harm through crime are familiar with the concept of restorative justice, that they understand kind of what can be achieved, that it can happen alongside traditional criminal justice methods, and that it's an option. And if you are a victim of crime in London, it's your right under the Victims Code of Practice to access information about restorative justice. So that's the hope, that we talk about it more. I said it earlier on and I'll say it again. It's probably a nice way to close the podcast, is that talking works and relationships matter. So let's do more of it. let's do more of it in London. Let's talk about restorative justice after you've seen the amazing play Punch.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Julie.
Experts by Experience is brought to you by Catch22. For more episodes, visit www.catch-22.org.uk. Now playing on National Prison Radio.